I'm Helen, if you don't know me. I'm a member of the congregation here, have been for a long time. I'm also a priest in the Church of England, in case you don't know that, and we've just had communion together. I work for the Church of England now, up in Westminster. So that's me. Really good to see you, especially if you're visiting us this morning. You are really, really welcome. So Simon and I are going through a bit of a rite of passage at the moment as parents. That's Simon in the sound desk. Yesterday, I went to my first university open day. I mean, except for the ones I did 30 years ago. And a bit sooner than that, actually, because I went to theological college. But this one wasn't for me, the first time that I've done that. And there was one really helpful talk for parents. It was really funny as well, so I was glad I was there for that, but mostly I was the transport because there was a train strike, so I had to drive. So we drove together, and I was given the opportunity, shall we say, of a wander around a beautiful university town, which was lovely, and it was sort of busy and bubbling, and there was a Saturday market, and that was, I resisted the urge to spend all my money on lovely cheese and that kind of thing. But as I walked around this town, I also had this morning's reading in my head. Obviously, I knew that I was going to be here this morning. And I found it really helpful as I began to think and reflect a bit on the transition that we are about to embark on. And, I'll try not to turn into a quivering mess in front of you here as a middle-aged woman, but many of you will have gone through this transition where your tiny children that you've poured yourself into day by day by day suddenly aren't under your roof moment by moment anymore. So I was beginning to kind of think about what that will be for our family. And I found actually listening to these words from Jesus really, really resonated, because as I said, we're in the upper room. So in John's Gospel, do you remember I said a couple of weeks ago, book of two halves, first book mostly about miracles and people's response to them. Second half of the book, where we are now and were last week, is called the Book of Glory. 9 chapters about Holy Week through to Ascension. And quite a big chunk of that, 5 chapters, all around the upper room and what Jesus wants to say to his disciples. Because they're not going to be together every day anymore. They've kind of come through this really intense period where Jesus has poured himself into them, tried to train them, tried to shape them, equip them, empower them, encourage them, give them skills they're going to need to be these kind of important sharers of faith going forward. And so we know that the words we listen to in that upper room are Jesus' kind of most critical things that he wants to share with this group of friends and followers before he's going to leave them. So you can imagine, as I was wandering around this university city yesterday, I was thinking, well, what did Jesus say to his disciples? What were the things he really wanted them to know? And does that hold anything for me in this time that we're going through, we're experiencing at the moment? The moment in the upper room is very poignant. So Jesus has washed the disciples' feet. Do you remember I was saying Jesus communicates not just through words? This was a very powerful enacting of something deeply unexpected. So the disciples are already a bit kind of, cool, that was strange and moving and not quite sure I fully understand what to make of it, but it was profound. Somebody that they have come to follow and worship, suddenly doing the most menial of tasks for them. Then he's instituted what we now know as communion, the Last Supper. He's had the bread and the wine and said, do this in remembrance of me. So again, another kind of communication that isn't just words, but now we are into the words. And if you were here last week, you will have heard Kate talk, I think, a bit about the first part of this chapter, which is quite a well-known passage about in my Father's house are many rooms, and I go there to prepare a place for you. And Jesus begins this kind of wave of encouragement, this wave of don't despair, this wave of I'm doing things for your benefit, this wave of you've got this, you can do this, a wave of pouring out his love and trying to give them some peace in this really, really difficult situation. And we continue along in that, in the passage we've got today. But I would say there's a bit of a hinge in the bit we've got today, where we just change gear, where Jesus just changes a little bit. And he says, I want to encourage you. And so I'm going to promise you this extraordinary gift. And we'll look at that in a moment, this gift of the Holy Spirit, this amazing gift. That's going to be a really helpful thing for you. So more reassurance, more encouragement, more you're going to be okay kind of language. But I think imperceptibly, gently, there's no kind of so pull yourself together and get on with it kind of tone. I don't think it's that. But just gently, I think Jesus begins to say, and there are some things you're going to need to do with it. Just setting some expectations, saying you're going to be okay. And also, there's some things really that you're going to need to do. So we've got those two things going on in this passage. So the first one of those, the first part of the passage, Jesus continues with reassurance and encouragement. And honestly, he takes it up a gear in this bit. Because alongside the promise that Jesus has made in the first part, that they'll be together again in the future in that mansion with many rooms, this is the first time, it's really, really kind of a moment, first time that Jesus promises the Holy Spirit to all of them. Verse 16, he says, I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate or helper, depending on which version you've got, and he will be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth. Now, this could be a bit confusing, this grand claim that this is the first promise of the Holy Spirit, because, of course, the Holy Spirit appears even in the Old Testament. But usually the Holy Spirit appears at specific times and for specific people, for specific purposes. And there are signposts towards the Holy Spirit in the New Testament as well. Just as an aside, I'm going to use the word he when I describe the Holy Spirit, mostly on this occasion, because the word parakletos, which is the word spirit we are translating in this particular passage, which is quite unusual, is a male noun in the Greek. Pneuma, the other New Testament word for spirit, is actually a female noun. And so there are people who choose to translate Holy Spirit as female. I need you to know I'm fine with that. But on this occasion, because we're in this bit of Greek, I'm going for the male pronoun. Get that bit out of the way. So, as I say, Holy Spirit in the Old Testament, usually for specific times, specific moments that he is needed. Kind of hinted at in the New Testament, and I love this quote from David Ford. If you haven't seen it and you're into this kind of thing, can I recommend David Ford's recent commentary on John's Gospel? It's beautiful. He spent his whole life studying these 21 chapters. And it isn't just kind of a dry theological tome. You can just feel his faith and his love for Jesus kind of pour out of pages of what sounds like, a theological textbook. I mean, there is a bit of that, but it's beautiful. Anyway, David Ford, if you want to go and look that up. And he says this: there's been a spirit-studded path to the farewell discourses. That's what we're in, the farewell discourses, highlighting the Holy Spirit abiding in Jesus. I love that, a spirit-studded path. So there have been these almost kind of rocks on the ground that point us into this direction, that lead up to this moment. He names some of those. So he notes that at the baptism of Jesus, there was a spirit, descended like a dove on Jesus. He notes that in that conversation with Nicodemus, way back, that's John chapter 3, quite early on, he says, man must be born of woman and the Spirit. Yeah, do you remember that? Talks about God being worshipped in spirit and in truth. All of those referenced in John's Gospel. So those are the stones on the pathway coming to this point. But in these verses, in chapter 14, we have the first explicit promise of the Holy Spirit for Jesus' followers. I want to just note two important things about the promise. Firstly, it's important to note that Jesus says in verse 16 that the Spirit will be with the disciples forever. forever. Now, we know Jesus wouldn't just kind of use forever in that kind of exaggerating, this is quite a long time, isn't it? Oh, the bus is taking forever to come. No, Jesus means forever, eternity. This is a done deal. If you decide that you love Jesus, the Holy Spirit is part of the package, and it's permanent. Not like some toy or some privilege. Do you remember if you were at secondary school, maybe you were in one of the older years? When I was in sixth form, we had the privilege of jumping in the lunch queue. So all the kind of little first and second years had to wait for the sixth formers to kind of stroll up with this newly found power and jump in and get the last really delicious looking whatever it was, and they would all miss out. But if as a sixth former you blotted your copybook and did something stupid, the teachers will make you stand at the end of the queue, and you lost the privilege because you'd made a stupid mistake or done something daft. This gift isn't like that. No one is going to take away this privilege because you've done something daft. No one is going to take away this gift from you because you think you're not good enough or somebody has told you you're not good enough. Jesus has dealt with all of that. We've just celebrated that at the table. This gift is a forever gift. Second important thing I want to note from verse 17, if you've got it in front of you, the Holy Spirit lives with you. I tend to use the NRSV, different version of the Bible, which translates things, that makes fewer decisions for you about the translation. And this version says the Holy Spirit abides with you, which I find just a richer kind of way of describing it. But lives with you is kind of the same. And it says at the end of that sentence, he will be in you. So it's not just somebody standing next to you. This is like an integral part of who you are. So I was saying that word translated as advocate or helper is different from the rest of the New Testament. So pneuma elsewhere, John specifically makes a decision. It's an important, intentional decision to use this word parakletos. And literally it means alongside, a walker alongside. And it was used, it wasn't exclusively used, but it was used kind of to describe the relationship between an advocate in the court, so you might think a barrister these days, who is speaking on behalf of somebody else, who is protecting their interests, who is looking after them, speaking up for them, empowering them, protecting them, being there for them specifically. So that's the kind of concept, idea that John is trying to communicate by specifically using this word. But with all language, there are some limits, aren't there? Because, of course, a parakletos, an advocate, is a whole separate person. And at the end of the court case, they physically, with their 2 feet on the floor, will go that direction, and you will go this direction. So Jesus specifically says, this particular parakletos isn't just beside you, he's in you. He is in you. He won't suddenly go in a different direction. Jesus uses a really emotive phrase, I will not leave you as orphans. Sometimes we can have a fear of that, can't we? Everyone's gonna leave us. I'm gonna be lonely, I'm gonna be on my own. And Jesus emphatically pushes back on that possibility. He says, I'm in you. We're not separate beings. I'm not suddenly going to disappear. I'm in you. Oh, and by the way, that's forever. So if you've decided that you love Jesus, then this powerful gift of the Holy Spirit, this permanent, personal gift from God the Father, is inside you, is part of you. He hasn't left you as an orphan. He won't abandon you. So even though we can't see Jesus as a kind of tangible flesh and blood person, the Spirit of God is with us all the time. And if you walk into a room where nobody else loves Jesus, suddenly the Spirit is in that room too. I find that mind-blowing. How encouraging was that for the disciples in that upper room? And I hope it's encouraging for us today. And I said at the beginning that Jesus makes this amazing promise to the disciples for reassurance and encouragement, empowerment at a difficult time. But I also think it's a gentle challenge that the Holy Spirit is for them to use for the good of other people too. And I'm going to illustrate that by way of a confession. I don't know how you do Christmas shopping in your family. Do you get weird, unexpected gifts from distant relatives who do their best but often miss the mark? Well, I think for a while that happened in our house and still does in some cases. Let me just say the feeling is they care and they've thought of me. That's our first feeling. But we do end up with one or two slightly, not sure what I'm going to do with that kind of gifts. So we do lists. Don't know if you do lists. We do lists. And on my Christmas list, I put a fitness tracker. And my lovely, kind family, generous as they are, which they are, saw the fitness tracker on my Christmas list, and as an expression of their love for me, they bought me the fitness tracker. And do you know what? Here it is. This is the one. This gift said, we love you, we've thought about you, we care about the things that you care about, so if you've said you want this, we want it for you. It says, be encouraged, we're with you in this. And I think it also said, you're paying attention to your health and well-being. Well, you want to pay attention to that too, because we care about you. So, that's pretty nice, isn't it? That's really lovely, so kind. But if you're sitting anywhere near the front of church today, well, firstly, good on you, because in the Church of England, we don't really do that, so thanks for sitting near the front. But if you are sitting near the front, you can see that this box looks in rather good condition. You might even say, well, a bit dusty, but mint condition, actually. And there's a reason for that, because, here's the confession, I have never taken this fitness tracker out of the box. Never. And the lovely ones of you in the room are assuming that I'm talking about the Christmas just gone. This was on my Christmas list in 2016. 6.5 years ago, and it is still in the box. I've never taken it out. It has never had the chance to do the things that it is absolutely designed to do. It's never counted my steps. It's never measured my heartbeat. It's never told me whether my sleep's okay. It's even waterproof and I like swimming. Never even smelt the smell of chlorine. It has been in the box the whole time. And do you even know the irony? I've moved house twice in that time. And I have taken this unopened box with me twice. I've put it in a box, packed it, paid for somebody to move it, just so that I can put it in the same place thinking, oh yeah, I'll do something with that, and not doing anything with it. Jesus gives us a gift, the Holy Spirit. Shall we not be the people who leave the gift in the box for 6.5 years, like I did? Sorry, love. I think Jesus moves to this kind of challenge to us as he answers a question from Judas. And John's careful to tell us not Judas Iscariot. He's left in disgrace from the Last Supper because he's got some really horrid business to do in betraying Jesus. It could be Jude or it could be Thaddeus, if you want to do a little forensic list of disciples and decide who it is, because obviously we've got the 12 in the upper room, or the 11 by now. But somebody called Judas asks this question, and John often uses questions as a kind of literary tool to change the kind of direction of the conversation. So in verse 22, Judas asks this question: Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world? Is that how it is in the NIV? No, reveal. How is it that you will reveal yourself to us and not to the world. Because, of course, Jesus at the beginning in that promise in verse 16 has said this. She says, I will ask the Father, he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth. This is verse 17, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him or knows him. Now, Judas is a muller. I like a muller. So he's obviously kind of caught that previous comment and is ruminating a bit on it. And so he pops up in the conversation a few verses later and says, hold on, that thing you just said a little bit ago, I want to dig into that a bit. So he says, how come you will reveal yourself to us and not to the world? That's a tricky question, isn't it? That's a hard question. But within it, Judas has jumped to a bit of a conclusion, because Jesus' words were, the world cannot see him. The world cannot receive him. And Judas assumes that that is Jesus' intention. Why aren't you revealing yourself to the world? Now, can you see they're slightly different propositions? So Jesus says the world cannot receive him. Judas says, why are you doing that? Now, I'm not quite sure that that is what Jesus has done, to make a deliberate choice not to reveal himself to certain people. Loads and loads of theological effort has gone into this question. And to my relief, and I've no doubt yours, I'm not going into a whole discussion on predetermination, predestination, Calvinism, Arminianism, any other ism, interesting as it is. But I want to offer a possibility of what Jesus is doing in his answer. So Jesus replied to Judas' question in 23. Verse 23 is this. He says, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, my commandments, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. And he says the corollary of that, if you don't love me, then you don't keep my commandments. And as usual, it seems like Jesus hasn't really answered the question on this one. And often in the Gospels, it looks like that. But actually, I feel like on this one, he did answer the question. How about this idea? I think Jesus might be saying to Judas, in sending the Holy Spirit to those who know me and who love me and consequently are keeping my commandments, living their life according to the ways that I have taught, in doing that, we are creating a new gift. We're making a new gift. This new gift to the world is a God-centered family community, loved by God, going about their day loving God, shaped by the word of Christ. You know that phrase that we often use as a bit of a put down, you think you're God's gift, don't you? Let me tell you, you are God's gift to the world. The gift is that you, if you have decided to follow Jesus, and we do our best, sometimes it's a bit ropey, but we do our best to live our life by his commandments, and the Holy Spirit has come to us, and our job is to show God to the world. You absolutely are God's gift. Just as Jesus was an embodied message of God's love, God poured all that he possibly could of himself into Jesus and sent him as a message to the world. This is what, if you think of God, think of me. I look like God. He's done the same with us. If you think you want to look at Jesus, look at us, the family of the church. Our job is to represent him. Now that's a bit intimidating, isn't it? If we look at the church today, and I work for one bit of it, is this what he had in mind? Are we what he had in mind? Well, we are, in that we're here. We absolutely are. We are God's gift. But I think Jesus is just sharing a bit of a challenge with Judas. You've got a responsibility here. Just as God poured himself into Jesus, by my Spirit, I am pouring myself into you. I am in you, and you are the message of God's love that is going to walk the face of this earth. And those people who haven't seen me, who can't receive me, haven't yet probably had the opportunity, are going to have that opportunity, because when you walk into the room, the Spirit comes with you. You are the message of God's love on earth. I was a bit blunter than Jesus with Judas. Sorry about that. No, not sorry. Take the encouragement, take the reassurance, take the empowerment, take the joy, take the privilege of having the Holy Spirit as a gift to you, personal, permanent gift from God. But as you do so, remember that you are now also an embodied message of God's love, salvation, provision, protection, cherishing, creation, a million other things that God has done for us. You are the embodied message of that to those you come into contact with. So as I finish this morning, sometimes I come to land and I say, I think there's a few different things going on for people this morning, and it might be this, and it might be this, and it might be this. I want to say to us this morning that I think both parts are for all of us. Take the encouragement, receive again the Holy Spirit. It's not like you've lost the Spirit. We do leak a bit, but he hasn't left you. But you might feel this morning, oh yeah, okay. Just need to tune in with that again, that God is in me in his Holy Spirit. That's pretty cool, and I haven't given that attention recently. So that might be what we need to do. But I don't want us to go away thinking that's it. Actually, the second part is for all of us too. So who is God calling you to be a message to? Who is God calling you with the Spirit in you to be that embodied message of hope of the gospel? And what did Jesus do? How did that look for him? He just washed their feet. Humble service, true love. Who is God calling you to serve and to love and to be that message to today? Should we stand together?